Thank you for listening to the Bayyinah Institute podcast. Please join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Bayyinah Institute, or you can join our email list at http://bayyinah.com and share these recordings with your family and friends.
بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ويسألونك عن المحيض قل هو أذى فاعتزلوا النساء في المحيض ولا تقربوهن حتى يطهرن فإذا تطهرن فأتوهن من حيث أمركم الله إن الله يحب التوابين ويحب المتطهرين نساؤكم حرث لكم فأتوا حرثكم أنى شئتم وقدموا لأنفسكم واتقوا الله واعلموا أنكم ملاقوه وبشر المؤمنين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم ما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So before today's halaqah begins and I talk about ayat number 222 and 223 of Surah Al Baqarah, I want to give you a little bit of a heads up. This one's rated PG-13. I would actually argue PG-18. So if we have younger children in the audience, I would suggest that you go home today. No, seriously, because we have to talk about some adult things in these ayat, and if it's not appropriate for younger audiences, then we should, take caution, because Quran deals with all kinds of subjects, and this is one of those subjects. Though I will try my best not to be explicit and to not be, obviously be inappropriate in discussing these things, but regardless, there is an age sensitivity in today's halaqah. Anyhow, Allah Azza wa Jal twice so far in these ayat has talked about the discipline of intimacy between husband and wife in the passages of Surah Al Baqarah. The first time it came up was in the ayat of fasting. So when fasting was mentioned, Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned that there is أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ, that in the nights of the fast, it is permissible for you to have intimacy towards your women. Then second time, Allah Azza wa Jal, when He was talking about the second main pillar of Islam, Al-Hajj, He said, فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. There is no intimacy, there is no fighting, and there is no argumentation and back and forth during the Hajj. So the prohibition of intimacy between husband and wife was mentioned in two circumstances, right? But the comprehensive nature, what about the rest of life? What about any other time in life? What are some discipline and regulations that Islam reveals in regards to intimacy between husband and wife? These are the comprehensive ayat that deal with that subject. Notice that in this passage there are the hurumat, right? So they ask you about alcohol, they ask you about the forbidden months, and now they're asking even about, so the Sahaba raised the question, is it okay? Because actually now the two times the ayat have already come about, you cannot have intimacy with your wife in this circumstance and this circumstance. So the question's actually raised by the Sahaba themselves, and they say, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. They ask you about the time of impurity. Mahid is a dharf, like, maf'il. And that wasn't from hayd. So the time of impurity for the spouse. They ask you about that. So, during the period of the female, may we have intimacy with our wives, Allah Azza wa Jall's first response is, قُلْ هُوَ أَذًا. Tell them it is a time of pain. Adhan. It's actually a masdar. And this is a form of hyperbole in the Arabic language because a time can be painful. And painful is just like in English, right? Painful is an adjective, but pain itself is an idea, right? But when you describe something in any language, you resort to describing it with an adjective, right? But like mu'dhin is an adjective. Mu'dhin is painful. Okay, that's the Arabic word. Well, if you say قُلْ هُوَ مُؤْذٍ, then the transition would be, tell them it is painful. But Allah Azza wa Jalla says, قُلْ هُوَ أَذًا. Tell them it is pain itself. It is pain itself. Now, it's not to say that and typically, by the way, the masdar, the idea used to describe something is done in the highest cases of hyperbole, but it's done to illustrate to men, because men are the ones asking, look, this is the kind of pain you will not be able to understand. But it is a very difficult form of pain. قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. And before I go forward, the other beautiful thing about the Quran is that, intercourse is not mentioned in explicit terms. The Arabic language is very rich and very picturesque. So there are plenty of rated R words available in the Arabic language. There are plenty of rated NC-17 words available in the Arabic language. The Quran talks about intimacy several times. Never once does it use an explicit word. Never once. And this is part of the nobility and the grandeur of the Quran, that it employs indirect language to talk about something that's obvious to everybody. Right? So يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ, but it's not spelled out. They ask you about the period of impurity. They don't ask you what they should do with their women it's not spelled out. It's just they ask you about the period of impurity. And then Allah does not go out explicitly to explain, let me tell you how that works, but actually it's painful. It's pain itself. That's it. فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. And then stay away. I'tizal actually means to avoid someone and stay away from them. This is the word used in Surah Al Kahf when the young people were to stay away. Get away from everybody, get away from society and go far away. فَاعْتَزِلُوا فَإِذَا اعْتَزَلْتُمُوهُمْ وَمَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ فَأْوُوا إِلَى الْكَهْفِ. Right? So Allah says, فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاء, stay far away from the women. But actually you have to understand this in the context of the ayah. It's talking about the intimacy between husband and wife. When it comes to that, stay away. Don't even try to cross that line. You will get carried away and you'll make a big mistake. So in that sense, stay away. You don't recite this ayah to your wife and say, this week I'm staying in a hotel, or you get a restraining order, religious restraining order from your فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. That's not what this means. Some ulama in our past, interestingly enough, did take it very, very literally, and they wouldn't even go near their wife, for any purpose, in that time. But actually that's an extreme position. Normally speaking, the idea is that you avoid that level of intimacy with the spouse at that time, fil mahid. And this is an important conversation to have, because we are, particularly now in our age, because we are living in a sexually very explicit society, where sex is actually a product. It's a product that's sold, right? And it's actually a tool within the arsenal, the marketing arsenal of any company that wants to sell its product. Right? So they use this device to sell you everything from jewelry to a watch to perfume to cars to you name it. It's used as a commodity. And of course, in the field of entertainment, to get ratings for a show, the more explicit and vulgar and disturbing you can make it, and the more exposed it can be, the more it's supposed to sell. Right? And this is the same thing that happens with musicians. Music is supposed to be, I guess, about music, but it's not anymore. It's about explicitness now. It's about how you can compensate for your lack of talent with your lack of clothes, right? That's what music has become now, right? So it is something very pervasive in our society. It's not to say that zina did not exist before, or manipulation did not exist before, but because of mass media and social media and the advent of the internet and television and all this other stuff, we have more access to filthy things than any society ever before us. We just have access to this stuff, And as a result of that, the perversion inside one's family life is very easy. That we actually see images on TV and they start controlling or start influencing what we think intimacy between a man and a woman should be like. And we start avoiding the restrictions that Allah Azza wa Jal has put on us. Actually, these perversions and these deviations, and the worst of them, of course, is the pornography industry, right? These perversions, what they do is they take human beings away from the fitrah. When your shame, when your dignity that Allah has granted you is destroyed. Because these filthy images, these shameless images, they destroy your sense of shame. They kill the spirituality inside a person. Their fitrah dies. And when that dies, then, they no longer have, you don't even have respect for yourself when you're watching images like that, much less to have respect for your spouse or anybody else. You start looking, I was talking a couple of days ago to a group of youth in New York, and I was telling them, once people get addicted to this kind of thing, then the young man, he doesn't even see a woman, he just sees a piece of flesh walking by. That's all he sees. Just like an animal looks at another female animal. It's just like prey. They're checking everyone out, just physically. That's all they are, is physical bodies walking around, worthy of checking out. And you just become this complete pervert that has no sense of dignity for another human being. And when you're in that state, then marriage is not your solution, by the way. Marriage is not, if you're a pervert before marriage, you're a pervert after marriage. You have to protect your dignity before you go into your marriage, because otherwise you're going to ruin what is supposed to be a beautiful relationship between the husband and the wife. Anyhow, so فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ, and don't go near them until they become pure. طَهُرَ in Arabic, this is the fa'ula form of the verb, which is interesting because it actually means of something to become something, to be something in and of itself. It's used for inherent qualities. Like they say karuma, to be honored. Karuma is used to be honored. Ba'uda, to be far away. It's an inherent quality. It's not something that's attained. It's not something that you acquire. So it's the beauty of the word is فَإِذَا حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ, until they become pure again in and of themselves. In other words, Allah Azza wa Jal, by using this word, describes women as inherently pure. And they go temporarily through a period of impurity. And He didn't even call it impurity. He didn't call it najas at the time. What did He call it? Adhan, pain. And this is again an honoring of women even in this period, that Allah called it pain. And of course that pain could be physical, psychological, emotional, all kinds of pain. Right? They didn't limit it to that. Incidentally, the word adha is used linguistically in the Arabic language, not just for physical pain, it's also used for emotional pain. It's the same word that Musa alayhi salam used when his people were causing him pain, and he turned to them and said, "Lima tu'dhunani? Why are you causing me pain?" Al-idha and al-idha'ur rusul, when the messengers were caused pain. So there's an emotional element to al-adha also. But regardless, when Allah says فَإِذَا حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ, until they become pure in and of themselves. So in other words, Allah does not even say when Allah allows them to become pure, or when Allah purifies them. Like طَهَّرَ in Arabic, حَتَّى يُطَهِّرُهُنَّ اللَّهِ, حَتَّى يُطَهِّرَهُنَّ اللَّهِ, until Allah purifies them. He didn't even say that. He said as though He created them inherently pure. And this is again an honoring of the female. فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ, then when they make the effort to purify themselves, the different pattern is used. It's not فَإِذَا طَهُرْنَ, it's فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ. It's tafa'ala, and tafa'ala has an effort in it. In other words, they take ghusl, they wash up, etc. تَطَهَّرْنَ. Then فَأْتُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمْ